My name is Luis Mier, and I'm self-support engineer for Building Point Pacific. And today I'm going to show you how to set up our robotic total station using two ways, using the base component setup and using grid lines. I want to show you the agenda for this class, and it's simple. I just want to show you what's the main objective of being here and what is the value. Then we are going to learn how to properly set up the robotic total station using the grid line and the component step by step. After that, we're going to have some exercises, and I'm going to summarize the class for you. Just going to say in these slides that you're free to pay attention, but I want you to be able to understand what I say. So we're gonna keep an environment that is healthy, that there's no interruptions. You can participate, you can get on your phone, but please stay and on the class and pay attention to the content. This is some information about me. As I said, my name is Luis, and I'm the instructor. So I want to show you something about my background, and I have 10 years or more than 10 years of experience using construction technology, and specifically since 2011. And I started working with Building Points since 2021. And I started my journey I went to college in my country in Colombia, and I had a degree in surveying or land surveying. Then I moved to the US, working in a degree in geographic information systems, had a bachelor's degree in geography in Arizona State University, and I'm working on my grad studies in order to complete my whole education in the United States. So this is my experience using technology and learning how to use technology every day. The main objective of this class is that you can learn you will learn how to properly use the base component and the grid lines to set up a robotic total station. That's the main objective of this class, and you should be able to tell anyone in your company, or you should be able to practice later. The main value, or the value, is that you can set up that information in your brain, setting that you can set up your equipment in two other different ways using the component and the grid line setup. So you can practice and improve that information over time. I want to know something about you. I want to know something about your company or your position. And if you want to share some information with me, it would be great. And so the component-based setup is interesting because it's a tool that allows us to use any component or a structure or feature in my model to set up a robotic total station. So it's an extra tool. It's practical because we can use any door or room or any square feature or cylindrical feature in the model, so we can set up our equipment. But you need to be very careful that the information that you set in up, or the points that you are measuring for that setup, are reliable and something that you can trust. As you can see in the screen, this is one of the features we want to use, or I want to explain why. This blue area is going to be the component. This is the whole model, and this is the information, your grid lines. These are the regular information for Trimble, your information options, your measure button, all the applications or the options you have that are more device and measure and create, and the basics. So the base components is going to use a feature that is one fabrication item in your model, so you can set up your equipment. And it depends on the model accuracy, your accuracy, of course. So the steps are simple. You go to tap in the device icon, and you want to select setup. So later, you're gonna use this option that is called base component setup right here in the right side. So the next step will be you to measure 3 points from the component. As you can see in the photo, once you shoot these 3 points from your component, you will be able to see your equipment, and later you can set up. So once you measure these points, the equipment will be able to tell you what is your residual. So that means what is your accuracy. And it's up to you if you want to accept it and set, so you can start doing your process or layout. And this is the base component setup. It's simple. It's an easy tool that you can use, and is something you can trust if you're doing it carefully. And the next is going to be the grid line setup, which is a tool that I would say that is not as reliable as the component setup, but it's still a tool from Trimble, so you can use it, and you can probably improve it over time as you get more used to use on robotic tool stations. But yes, it's not the same that using your grid lines and offsets from the grid lines, but it's basically using the actual grid line in some points in order to set up your equipment. So the accuracy is not going to be, it depends on the process, and it depends on how accurate is the grid line set in the field. And the process is simple. You need to, again, tap in device option and then select the grid line option. That should be this one. Once you select that option, the software will ask you to select the first grid line you're going to use. So you select that one, and it turns blue. And then it shows you that you're going to move to the first point in that grid line. So we're going to move and select and measure that point. Then the software asks me to select the second point in that grid line. I will move with my prism, and I will measure that grid line. So I will next select my second grid line, and then measure the first point in that grid line. And then later, I will measure the second point in the same grid line. And once I finish with that, I will be able to see the station position, as you can see, and some deviation results that you can accept, or you can just say, I cannot trust this information. So if you hit set, your machine will be ready to work, ready to complete the layout. It's simple, it's not complicated, but again, it's using the grid line. It's something that is not as reliable as using actual offsets, 5 by 5 or 5 from your grid lines. So it's it need to be used carefully, so you can understand the process and you can also trust in the process. And then you can see the accuracy. You can accept the deviation, and you can select set. This is the grid line. So this is basically the way you can use basically align the grid lines towards your machine using geometry in order to set and correct the triangulation in the robotic tool station. After that, you can reference your elevation, and you can do layout. I have some information and some questions about the process, and I want to ask you to work with me in one of these questions. And one of the questions, so it's like a true or false statements. I can complete a component setup with 2 control points. And it should be false because we need at least 3 control points. And the base component setup and grid line setup are the only ways to set up an RTS, and this is false because we should use more. There are at least 5 ways to set up your robotic tool station. And the third question will be grid line setup is the most reliable way to set up an RTS, and it's not, it's false, because this is the less reliable way to set up your RTS. And the question 4 would be setup, the grid line setup is similar as base component setup, and they are not similar because grid lines is obviously using the lineation of your grid lines, and the base component is using a feature in your model. And the fifth question that will be a base component setup is used by, and this is true. So if I want to summarize the information by telling you that these are two ways to set up your laboratory station. These are not the only two ways, but these two ways can allow you to have more variety in what you're doing using your RTS. It's no use the best way, probably using a grid lines, but in the end, we gotta use whatever we have in the field. So we have an RTS, so we have a prism, we have all the information, and all we have are grid lines and some points, we're gonna use it. And if we have a component in the field that we can use to set up our equipment, we wanna use it. The classic way to set up the total station, of course, is gonna be recommended, but in this case, these are the two options, two more, so you can enrich the way you can do it, your projects, and you do it better. And I want to say thank you for paying attention to this class, and this is my information.